The idea of The King and I was a kind of combination of awareness that the film versions of musicals are as legitimate as the Broadway versions in many cases, because the composers were part of the film adaptation. So it wasn't just, that they sold the rights and whatever Hollywood did was just its business. But Richard Rodgers, for example, Rodgers and Hammerstein absolutely had control over the Rodgers and Hammerstein movies. So Oklahoma, Carousel, The King and I, South Pacific to some extent, and Sound Music, of course, Hammerstein was dead, but Rodgers was very much involved with that. So we thought it would be interesting, since we're the Hollywood Bowl Orchestra, to record one of these famous, brilliant, Broadway scores, but in the Hollywood orchestrations of them. Now, the difference for the listener watching this is that on Broadway, a full orchestra in those days was 24 players. A full orchestra for a movie version could be 90 players. You have four horns, you have two harps if you want, you have a bass oboe, you have a full symphony orchestra. I always found that the 20th Century Fox adaptations were the best, as great as the MGM ones were, because Alfred Newman, who won lots of Academy Awards as an arranger, and he had Eddie Powell as his principal orchestrator, they did something extraordinary. They took the songs and then underscored the scenes by taking melodies and using them as a Wagnerian leitmotif. So I thought, okay, if we do The King and I, not just do the songs, but do the underscoring so that a person listening to the album from start to finish hears the story of The King and I without ever seeing it, because the music tells the story. I'm sure it was Michael Gore who had the idea of Julie Andrews and set up that meeting with her. And amazingly enough, and so Michael and I went to meet Julie, no one had ever asked her to sing this role. It's a role that was written for her. I mean, the role is so obviously should have been a triumph for Julie Andrews. So she was, I think, almost 60 at the time. And she loved this idea. And so we came up with various casting, and Michael did a lot of it. When Julie met Ben Kingsley, it was like an electric shock. These two people were just so into meeting each other that I looked at Michael and he looked at me, and I thought, well, we could just leave the room. These two people are just having this time. So I got permission from 20th Century Fox to get all of the orchestrations and to make a version of it, an audio version of The King and I, in which, yes, you have all the songs you want, but also certain text could be spoken, because Julie is such a great actor, and she pulled in her friends so we could tell the story. But there's some moments in that score that are so unbelievably beautiful, where Al Newman, the genius of Alfred Newman, again, Ukrainian Jew, escapes from the pogroms, and runs 20th Century Fox for years and years, for decades, that this genius of creating a kind of a tone poem. So it's The King and I, and you can go to the tunes, you can go to the tracks. But if you listen to it from the main title right into arriving in Bangkok with, I don't know, there was something like 8 or 9 percussionists to play all of the gamelan music everybody's there. This is a full recording of that soundtrack. And then Julie doing a Whistle a Happy Tune, and with Ben Kingsley's son playing Louis, is so adorable. It is so adorable because he was so young and so sweet, and his English accent is so perfect. We made what I consider one of the happiest, representations of the happiest moment in my life.
Well, I whistle a happy tune, and every single time the happiness in the tune convinces me that I'm not afraid.
When I saw The King and I when I was 10 years old, the movie, it changed my life. And I actually produced it in my backyard. And this is the truth. I was the king. My girlfriend, Judy Lieberman, if you're listening out there, Judy, I love you, was Anna. And I knew that we couldn't sing it. So what we did was we took the soundtrack and we recorded. I reconstructed the story. I wrote a script, right? I wrote the script. We recorded the script. We put in the songs, and so we lip synced the entire show. And we did it in my backyard. And it was such a hit that the next weekend we had to do it for the grandparents. So there were two performances of The King and I. And so now there I was 10 years old. And now it was, I don't know, 50 years later. And I was now working with Julie Andrews, whom I had seen when I was 11 in The King and I mean, in My Fair Lady. And now she was next to me. And Julie said, and I've written this down a few times, that Blake, her husband, said, you were all in a state of grace. And it's true. When you listen to that recording, we are just a kind of in an ecstasy of being together. And when Marilyn Horne came in, she's known as Jackie, and I've known Jackie Horne since I first assisted Leonard Bernstein at Carmen at the Met, and she was Carmen, 1972. As Julie said, well, Jackie came in and taught us how to sing. And, she just did Lady Chiang and she sang her one song. And it was just a wonderful time. And I'm so glad that that's been re-released now, because it is a tribute to the genius of Rodgers and Hammerstein and also the genius of the Fox music department. Because if you listen to the Broadway recordings of The King and I, they're great. I mean, mind you, Robert Russell Bennett was a great orchestrator. He had the dilemma of writing for 24 players, right? Now you're over in a full symphonic depiction of that score. And the composer, Richard Rodgers, is present. I mean, the one time I spent time with Richard Rodgers, he told me quite clearly that was his favorite film version of any of their shows. So it seemed like the appropriate one to do.